Good evening, everyone, and welcome to fiscal year 2023 budget discussion meetings. This is the Ways and Means Committee of the Greenfield City Council. It is Monday, April 25th, 2022. It is 6:01 p.m. I'd like to call this meeting to order. This meeting is being recorded and videotaped by the Ways and Means Committee and GCTV 15. If any other persons present are doing the same, you must notify the chairperson at this time. Okay. We'll do a roll call. Councillor Jarvis?
Here.
Councillor Jasorger?
Here.
Councillor Toronto?
Here.
Councillor Healy? And I'm Councillor Forgy. We do have a quorum there's 4 of us present. There is no approval of minutes. There is no public hearing this evening, and there are no motions for us to take up. The single item on our agenda for tonight is budget discussion, and everybody should have their budget book in front of them. And I'm sorry, Mayor?
I'm sorry, but Robbie has texted me that he's not able to get in. It says that that message says we've let the host know you're here. Does he need a
Click on the right
link?
I'm gonna get out and try again. He's had that problem before. I'll text him.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I thought it was important you know that.
It is important, and thank you. I appreciate that. We are going to start tonight with the Greenfield Police Department budget. I hope we'll hear from Chief Haig. And after police, we'll do dispatch, animal, and parking. And then we will go on to the fire department budget. And then finally, we will end with the DPW budget. Just so that's clear to everyone, our police department budget starts on page 107 of the budget book. Chief, let's see if I can.
Trying the link again, he just said, so.
Councilor Forgy,
Yes.
are we doing the entire police and fire department budget tonight? Because the way the agenda read, that wasn't clear to me.
Yes, we are. The intention is to do all of these 3 budgets this evening. Okay, I do see the chief. I think I do. Hello, Chief. Thank you for
A lot of backlight.
That's okay. We're just glad to see you.
Sorry about that. I'm sitting on the other one, just waiting to be let in, so I had to log out apparently.
Oh, that happens. Yeah, I know. Okay, so thank you for being with us here, Chief Haig. And if you'd like to start us off talking to us about your operating budget for fiscal year 23, we'd be grateful.
No problem. Give me one quick second here. I'm just trying to. For some reason, it wasn't letting me into Munis either, so I'm trying to figure that part out as well.
107. 107.
So. I'll just have to wing it without my Munis numbers if that works for you. I think I can use the budget book, and I think Councilor Forgy, I did email you that request that you had for, I believe, the salary list. So you should have that in your email.
Okay, thank you. I did not check my email, so.
Is that something we all, I'm sorry, Councilor Forgy.
Yes, Councilor Jasorga.
Do we all have that, Councilor Forgy?
Let me just see what I've got here. Hang on just a second.
Okay. I've got anything.
Okay. Okay. I don't know how to share a screen, but I can forward this to you, to counselors right now, if that will help. Let me see.
So let me know when you get that. I can
No
start.
problem.
Chief Hague,
Yes.
I just emailed you your detail report.
Oh, thank you, because it's not, for whatever reason, let me in right now. Thanks, Liz. Appreciate it. Sorry, I'm just getting back to town, so I just kind of have a little bit going on.
Have to love technology. Or hate it.
Ah, there it is. Thanks, Liz.
Yeah.
Technology does afford you all the ability to watch me eat dinner.
Okay, wait a minute. For Pete's sakes. Okay, I think I've got it. I'm going to forward this. Let's see. I'm going to send. Please tell me if you get it, okay? It's gone.
Liz.
Okay. Okay, I don't
No,
know.
but
It's,
I don't have an attachment with it. If there was an
No.
attachment, it didn't follow.
I don't either.
well, Chief, let us try to proceed, and you can, and we can modify the discussion for that. I'm very
Does
sorry.
everybody have access to the Munis reports, counselors?
They were sent summary ones, yes.
Okay, so basically what you were looking for, Counselor Forgy, was just a breakdown of individual salaries. All of that is actually somewhat put into the Munis report. I can explain individual salaries if that is something of interest, but otherwise it's just broken down within Munis's whole numbers. But if you're
Okay,
looking for,
well,
like, say, a step
okay.
7 patrol officer, that's in Munis as, the 69,651. So the numbers are there. The same thing I would have sent you on that spreadsheet. Those are actually in Munis as well, on the Munis
Okay.
sheet. So,
Okay, so, Chief,
but I
if I
certainly can
could,
answer any individual questions for you as well, if that helps.
yes, and I think that the understanding that we've been going with salaries is we really do want to know who's got independent contracts with the mayor, because everything else, I believe, should be covered by a union contract, which is settled. And basically, we don't have anything to say about that contract. That's a done deal. So it'll just be people that have an independent contract with the mayor that we'll be talking about, which I know is you. I do not know if
Myself, the
it's,
deputy chief, and the court officer are the 3 that I have within my building.
okay, that's
We're
fine.
all
So,
non-represented. Yep.
okay, so when we get to that part, we will turn it over to you for discussion then for those 3 salaries. But I wondered if you would just like to say something to us as you present your budget. Give us an overview.
Certainly, thank you. Basically, what I did this year is at the request of the mayor is this is pretty much a bare bones salary budget. It does incorporate, to the best of my ability, all the contracts and current employees that we have. There is no current additional employees in this budget, even though I had originally requested them. But obviously, we had to whittle it down to get to a number that is workable for for us in this department without losing any people. So my budget, as presented, takes into account for very little increases from last year outside of contractual. That's where you'll see some of the numbers inflated a little bit from last year, basically from last year, because we had both patrol and supervisory, as well as when I get to dispatch, the dispatchers all kind of came out this year with their contracts. The supervisors hopefully will be settled by the time this contract gets into place. But I'm confident that the numbers that I'm presenting you today will pretty much be that even after the July 1 deadline without getting into contract negotiations, obviously.
Okay.
So when we start looking at some of the, I'll point out some of the differences I think is the best way to start with some of the numbers that look bigger this year than they did last year. One of which would be your weekly shift differential. That went up substantially over last year. And the reason for that is contractual. That was part of the patrol contract negotiations. That contract is settled. This takes into account for those contract increases. That's why that number is larger than the year before. We start looking at, let's see, longevity pay went down a little bit because obviously we have some retirements. So that's the reason for the change there. So we lost some big numbers and brought down some other ones. If you're looking at the salaries, I'll just point this out. It didn't really change much because we retired some of the senior people, and obviously we put on a whole bunch of people that aren't senior anymore. So we've got a pretty young department. So that's in there. The other one that you'll notice a little bit of is the career incentive, also contractual. We negotiated out those split rates that we had. We feel very strongly that we want educated people working for the police department in a variety of different education fields, not just criminal justice. You know, we would love to have sociology, social work, psychology, these other skills that we would like to have within the department. So it was crucial that we could pay for those. People that are coming in with different degrees other than criminal justice are a benefit to us, to be honest with you, as the city as well. So that's why that number, as you look at it, is a little bit more. Holiday pay, again, contractual. There's some holiday pay that went up for officers within this building, myself included. And then you look at, I think if you look at the other categories, the overtime, the court, the training, and our temporary part-time wage line, those didn't change, and they really haven't changed in several years. So even with the pay going up and the overtime pay going up because of contracts, those numbers we've kept pretty lean and don't have a whole lot of room to spare. I know the temporary wage part-time line looks a little bit big, but we used that all in about the first 4 months this year, training new employees. So that's where that figure comes into play. We don't have any overtime money per se or any other money for part-time people outside of that line. So that's why that line this year looks like it's completely gone. Actually, I think we're in the negative this year because we did try to train a bunch, but we hired a bunch. So that's really on the salary side of things, the wage line of things. So I'd be more than happy to kind of answer those questions first, if that helps you before we move into the bottom.
Sure, that would be fine. Committee members, are there any questions you have for Chief Haig regarding salary and wages?
I do.
I have a question.
Okay, did I hear Mike Toronzo first?
Possibly. That was me speaking. It's kind of, this goes into even some of the discussions we had with some of the other ones. So when you were talking about the court and training overtimes kind of just being, flatline, same rate and stuff, do we have any kind of idea? It looks like in 2021 is the last actual numbers we have, and the court overtime, the training overtime were significantly lower than what was adopted and requested in 2022, 2023, respectively. Do we have any kind of numbers on what we've utilized now that we're, 3/4 of the way through 2022 for those two items?
I would like to caution that the numbers during COVID skewed a lot of things. We
Sure.
weren't able to get out. Trainings actually weren't happening. We had to do 90% of it in-house. So we were
Okay.
paying for a lot of, it's not the ideal way to train police officers, having your own department personnel training yourself. That's
Sure.
really not the ideal way of doing it, but we did have to do that for basically the 2 years of COVID, which is why those numbers, when you look at them, look like we really didn't use them. Not necessarily. I would go back a couple of years when you saw that we almost exhausted all of our training overtime. It's
Okay.
really hard to tell on training because we don't know when we're going to do it. So, for example, if we have to train twice a year for firearms, we typically either do that in the beginning of the year or the end of the year when you can actually get outside. We don't typically do it in the winter. So you may see a large amount of money up front in the beginning of the year being spent on, say, firearms training. This year we're doing it in the second half of the year, so that's all coming up now.
Right.
So people are doing them last week, they'll do them next week, and that's obviously very expensive training for that because that's all physical. And we have to do that twice a year, and it costs money with ammunition and everything else that we actually don't have budgeted for. So when you look at like the training number for this year, by the end of the year, you will see that we use more. Now, did we use it all again this year? No, because we're still in the kind of tail end of COVID. Trainings got canceled all the time that we wanted to send people to. So we have 40 hours of mandatory training for every officer. We have 34 officers. Typically, there's only 24 hours that are offered by the state. We have to come up with the other 16. So that's where our number usually comes into play with this training overtime, is us sending people out to go to other trainings, and that costs money every single time you do it.
Okay. I'm asking like for the because of the sake that we don't, I mean, at least in here, obviously I wasn't on the council 3 years ago. Were these numbers a little bit more reflective of what, let's say pre-COVID 2018, 2019 numbers look like? I mean, obviously we have to adjust for everything probably costing a little bit more, but just, I don't know if you have that off the top of your head or
well,
if
I can go into
can speak
what
to
I
it.
have. I can go into right now and give you an estimate of what we've used and what we're going to use.
Yeah.
Okay.
That helps.
You sure?
Yep, I've got it right here. I just got to pull it up. We do it. I have myself and my admin assistant. We do this pretty much every 2 weeks after the new year to make sure that we're not going to run out of money for anything really.
Right.
So if you just give me one quick second, and I'll just find it for you. So this would have been as of last month. We haven't done April's yet because I've been away for the last couple of weeks with other matters. So when we're looking at our training overtime right now, it currently has about 33,000. Well, it's going to be a little bit less. We're probably around $30,000 left in our training budget as of right now. You're going to look at close to 15,000 of that will be gone just based on firearms. We still have to get through CPR first responder training for the year. That hasn't happened yet. Typically, we work with the folks at the Franklin County House of Correction because they have trainers for us, and that is basically done all on overtime as well. So you're probably looking at about $5,000 to get that done. We try to send people as best we can on duty. That's another one we can't do in house, so we have to send people out for it. I would say in this line for this year, just based on what I'm looking at and what we did not last year but 2 years ago, we'll probably be in the positive in the training overtime a little bit this year. I couldn't give you a hard figure. I mean, we may end up with $7,000-8,000 left over in that this year. We've had other years when we've had a lot of trainings available. One of the things we didn't do since COVID is I haven't had any of my detectives go out for detective school yet. They have to do that at some point. And we've kind of done it in-house with other detectives kind of teaching our current ones how to do their jobs, but we've just started getting into sending them out. So there'll be a cost for that at some point as well. The court overtime, that number I've reduced over the years. I think when I got here, we were looking at somewhere in the $50,000 range for court. We hired a court officer, a lawyer, who's fantastic for me. And since we have had him on staff, we have been able to reduce that number down to that $20,000, and I don't believe we've ever gone over it. Now, with that being said, we haven't had a whole lot of court activity because of COVID. You will start seeing, once they come back in session, because the court typically takes off a month or so in the summer where they kind of shut down and they don't do a lot of hearings. By the end of this year, you're going to start seeing all those overflow cases from the last 2 years that have not gone coming to fruition. That number I think we'll be okay on, but you are going to see that number jump up. But like I said, I have a court officer who makes sure that officers are actually needed for that, and that's why that number is as low as it is.
Okay.
Regular overtime, that's a whole different ballgame. As of right now, we have left about $12,000 to get us through the rest of the year. That's not going to make it.
No.
So what'll end up happening is we'll end up using some of that training overtime and court overtime to balance out that negative. And it's just sheer numbers. We're not going to make it. When COVID happened, every time somebody's out on COVID leave, you got to pay overtime from somewhere, and we're paying for it. So we're not getting any reimbursements for that. We haven't asked for anything on the PD side. Dispatch, I can address that separately. But on the PD side, we've been paying overtime out of that, and then the city, I know, goes for certain reimbursements on it. It's not wholly reimbursed for PD just because salaries. I understand we get paid more than the average city worker. I'm not blind to that. But obviously, the amount of overtime that we need to cover shifts when they're out is substantial. We started the program with the community support officers. That overtime comes out of a different pool of money. That comes out of a grant that we've applied for. So those type of hours don't come out of that regular overtime. So all that overtime is really just departmental function. It's not specialties. Specialties, we're doing really well with our grants between CIT and, they're all CIT basically through our mental health coordinators. And we use all that money separate. So I don't want people to think that we're having these special programs and that's why our overtime is getting blown up, because it's just not. That's just from day to day, people not being here in COVID.
Sure. All right.
Councillor Jasorger.
Hi, Chief.
How are you?
Good. So I saw on your request, you had requested for salaries, top line, like 75,000 more. So you were thinking about another officer. We have 34. Does that include the deputy chief and you and the court officer?
It includes the deputy chief and me. No, the court officer is a civilian. So we have 3 civilians that work for the police department as well.
Right.
I have an administrative assistant, I have a records clerk, and I have our court officer. I was looking to put on an additional lieutenant. And the reason I wanted to put that person on is we're going to body cameras. We've already got cruiser cameras. We have a whole lot of administrative work that's going to have to be done that we're not going to have people for.
Right.
You can't have the same level people looking at the same level people. And with body cameras coming in, that is going to be a massive amount of work. We haven't even seen yet the public records requests that we're going to get from body cameras.
Mm-hmm.
Poor Jillian, who already gets inundated constantly with requests for public records, is going to get absolutely slammed when body cameras get turned on. So I was looking for somebody that could be a high enough level person to be able to oversee these programs. And we don't have that right now. I have 2 lieutenants right now, that is it. And they oversee everything. I have a patrol side and I have an administrative side. And my administrative side is handling a whole lot of work between dispatch, cameras, our grant writer. We're not going to be able to handle all of the patrol functions when it comes to body cameras with one person. It's just not going to happen.
And Chief, follow up if I may. We're relatively low on the staffing. I looked at this last year. I mean, for per 1,000, 34, it's like 1.8 to 2.6. I think this is just something that I looked up, my Google, which isn't anything like what you would know, and I know that. But just for the benefit of those who are listening, we certainly don't have more than the average number of people per 1,000.
Oh no, definitely not. I mean, if you want to use the national, a lot of those are nationally done kind of polls. If you're going to look at that, you're right. We're not overstaffed, if that's
Right.
what you know, as you're saying. I'm not here to tell you that I'm understaffed by 9 people, and that's probably what the number is. It's probably 43 people. If you look at kind of the national number, I'm not saying I need that. I need one more person to help at the higher level with the administrative side. That's what I was looking for. But also my main goal, as I've said every single year, is to retain the people we have, never lose anybody, never lay anybody off, and make sure that our folks have a good quality of life. That's my main goal every year. So if I can get a little bit more to help them, then I'm going to ask for it. But I'm certainly not going to do something that's detrimental to them either. And my feeling is, when you look at this, just having been, when I was in Orange, it taught me how to budget. Okay. If I wanted another sergeant in Orange, you know what they would have told me? Cut a patrol officer. I won't do that here. Our patrol folks there are people that actually do the work. Okay. They're the ones that make me look good. Those are the ones that are dealing with the hot calls, the people that are in crisis, those calls that are going out the door that are the most dangerous, to be honest with you, the most dangerous. I refuse to short them. They don't deserve that. So if I can get something to help them from the top down, absolutely. I just greatly appreciate the people that are doing the job that I once did too. And I would have hated to have my chief get rid of one of my fellow patrol officers so that they could help themselves out at the top. It's just not how I do things.
And my follow-up, if I can, Councilor Forgy, and we have a
Sure.
higher, I mean, you're doing a great job, but I mean, there's a lot that happens here, crime-wise. I'm asking this for the benefit of people who are listening too.
Certainly.
You know, for other counselors that are on. Is that correct?
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah.
Okay. There's how many, and can I finish my questions, Councilor Forgy?
Yes,
Okay, this
please,
is
go
just,
ahead.
so we have one K-9 person, is that correct? I think I asked this of Director Letourneau.
One that's getting paid K-9 pay, if that's what you're asking. Yes, we have one.
Yeah.
We have the
And then
comfort
how
dog
many
program,
detectives?
but
We have
that's
how many
different.
detectives, two?
No, we have more than two. I believe we have, the change constantly, just give me 1 second to count. I believe we have 4.
Okay.
Thinking correctly. Parrington, Green, Patinsky. Yes, I have 4. And then I have 2 community resource officers that are assigned to our co-response unit.
Okay, thank you very much. That's all. Wait.
Councillor Jarvis, would you like to ask any questions? You're all set?
No, I'm good. I just want to point out to people that that if you look, and we haven't gotten to that. I'm good with the wages. When we get to the other part, part of the presentation with the gasoline, and clothing, and stuff like that, or I'll just point it out now, is that the chief has budgeted $40,000 for gasoline, and that was done before the crisis we're in now. So things that counselors need to keep in mind, and I'm just saying this to the benefit of all the counselors, is that we're going to have 3 heavy departments that depend on fuel and oil and petroleum products, and that at the end of the year they're going to be spending bottom line out of these already tight budgets to probably pay for their diesel, their fuel, and their heat and oil and stuff like that. So as we go through these and we see some lines that are a little bit higher at the end of the year, when we go bottom line and they ask permission to spend bottom line from the mayor, that's how the budget process works. And I just wanted to point that out to some counselors that may not know that that's actually how the budget process works. And they're going to be tight in all those categories, the DPW, police, and fire. So I won't re-say it again for the other 2 departments.
Well, why don't I just hit that one for you right now, Counselor? We're out of gas money. It's gone. And I'll be honest with you, prior to this gas explosion in price, we were fine. We were going to make it. There wasn't even going to be a question in my mind. And then that happened and we're out. This March report had only $2,200 left in my gas account for the year out of that 40 in March. So I'm pretty sure now that we're in April, it's gone. So we're already looking at spending bottom dollar right now. When you look at the bottom, there's a couple things that we don't budget for that we do have to pay for. Building maintenance. We are currently $0 in the actual account for the building. I've expended almost $11,000 on basic repairs to the building. I don't even have a line item for that. There isn't one in the budget, but we've spent 11 grand. So we're already in the hole there. Radio equipment. I've already expended $16,000. We only budget $9,000 for it. So I'm already in the hole, $6,700 on that one. And that's if nothing else goes wrong with the radio system, which, as Chief Strahan will tell you, something always goes wrong with the radio system. We don't budget for trash disposal. I don't know why. I've asked that almost every year. I don't understand why we don't budget, because we have to shred. There's certain things that we just can't throw in the trash. So we pay for the shredding. So shredding, I'm about $500 in the hole in shredding. That typically gets to about $1,000 by the end of the year. Because we at the PD have to shred everything that has anybody's names, dates of birth, social security numbers, as well as police reports. So those all get shredded. We don't have a choice on that. We did put a couple people through training this year for new hires. Whenever we have new hires, even though they come here fully trained, which we've been very fortunate since going out of civil service to be able to do this, you still are required to send them for a physical. You still are required to make sure that they have a mental health evaluation. These are the things we just have to do by accreditation anyway. And on top of that, you'd want them to do that. You don't want to own somebody else's problems from another department because they had a bad leg or a bump shoulder, and you're bringing them in with that. So we still have to do that. So we've had a bunch of new hires over the last year and a half, 2 years, and that academy physicals line is always in the negative, and this year it is the same, 1,500 almost in the hole already this year. I don't know if we're going to be hiring again this year. I don't anticipate it, but you never know. But there's no more money for that one. Telephone, looks like we have plenty of money in that account. The only thing I will caution on that is $10,000 out of that account is for the what we're going to have for the body cameras when we turn them on in the cars. It's going to be about $10,000 a year alone just to have the equipment to turn those cameras on, to have that relayed back to the PD, to make sure that we record. They're basically giant hotspots that go on the cruiser. So that's 10 grand a year. So that was in my budget for this year because we were hoping to have the cameras before now. We now know the cameras are coming. We just haven't got all the equipment for it yet, so we're not able to turn them on yet. But I'm also cautioning you, I'm not going to turn them on unless we're ready. And if we're not, because once you do this, you can't go backwards. We can't turn them on and then decide next year we're not going to have cameras anymore. It doesn't work that way. So I'm going to make sure that we're able to handle administratively everything before we flip the switch on these. And I know that's not going to be a popular comment with some folks on the full council, but that's just the reality. We can't screw this one up. We did get a grant to cover all the equipment for the body cameras and all the equipment to go with the body cameras, and it was a huge number. So it's worth doing it correctly. Some of the other things that have gone up that we just can't account for is our dues and memberships. We're always over on that. We have more subscriptions to things now between our trainings and our online trainings. We have an online training system that we have access to. It's not ideal, but at least we can get some of our mandatory trainings done. So that's already in the hole for this year. The other numbers that are in here, and I just want to make sure I hit any of them that I've increased on, because I'm sure those are the ones that are going to have the questions. There aren't too many that I've gone up on from last year. Range allowance, that's contractual. That's why that went up a little bit, but that's, like I said, $300. Clothing allowance went up a little bit, but that's because we have specialty people that get a couple $100 more in theirs. That's by contract as well. I got to pay for my suits, so I need a little bit more for that. Then we've got, I think I added a little bit for dues and memberships just because we're always short on that. And then if you see the cruiser leases, 105 is what my cruiser leases are right now. A little bit more, actually. That's for 2 or 3 year leases, depending on what we do. I did a new purchase order for this year for 2 cruisers. The cruisers that I did were hybrids, and because of that, they're delayed. You can't get a car, period. I think in the regular world, you can't get a car. In municipal, it's even worse. We haven't seen them yet. which means we haven't paid a bill yet for this year. It is my intention to pinch pennies for the rest of this year and pay off that 2-year lease all at once because we don't have the cars yet. That is the only reason that number for next year is cut in half, is because I'm going to get rid of it this year by trying to be as frugal as possible. The gas issue did not help us because that's usually somewhere when we're driving hybrids. Just imagine if we didn't have hybrids for patrol cars. But I could save a little bit there and use a little bit of money there. I don't have anything there. The fact that I had to pay almost 11 grand for the building so far, I don't have anything there. I'm going to have to figure out a way to find $52,000 in this year's budget to get rid of that 2-year lease, so that next year I can make the last payment of the 3-year lease on marked cars. I have said this for many, many years. I completely disagree with having cruisers in our operating budget because they are leases, and when you do that, you have no ability to wiggle whatsoever. Those have to be paid, period. You have to pay your leases once you sign them. I'd much rather go to Capital and ask for $200,000 for 3 cars or 4 cars and have you give me only 2 than having them in my operating budget under leases. But that's just the way it is. I understand it. I don't know if it's legalities or not. It's just my personal feeling. And unfortunately, when I look to make cuts, I can't cut that line. They have to get paid. So.
May I ask something about that?
Yes, go ahead, Councilor Sorger.
So I don't understand that either, because in capital budget, we did leases for the fire department cars.
We did leases for my cars the first 3 years I was here, I believe. But
Right.
Liz, I know,
So-
can probably explain.
So I know Director Gilman's on the line. I just totally don't understand why this is, and I'm not putting one department against the other, although it kind of sounds like it.
No, not at
I
all.
don't mean it like that. I'm just looking at it and I'm thinking, I didn't get why this was in your, one of your line item things, because we didn't hear anything about that in capital projects. So I think I guess you're the only department that has this in your budget. So maybe Director Gilman knows that, or someone else, whoever
So
else knows it.
the only reason the fire department lease is before you is because it's more than 3 years. Departments may enter into a lease 3 years or under without council approval. They can just do it from their budget or available funds that have been appropriated. So in other words, the reason the police cruisers and most auditors will even tell you is they don't even view them. They view them more as a supply because you go through them so quickly. It's true.
No, I'm not disagreeing with you at all.
Quite honestly, the argument I've heard in the past is that we can't be dependent on capital yay or nays to replace those cruisers. That's what I've always been told.
Okay.
They really are. I understand. I think what the chief has done with the cruiser leases is very good, because then the officers always have dependable vehicles. It's not up to whether capital approves it or not, whether the cars get replaced. And as you know, they get a lot of miles per year.
Mhm.
They go through them very quickly. Whereas I'll give a difference for the fire chief. Those are usually unusual vehicles that come to you. For example, ambulance or pumper, or and they're more expensive too. But the leasing can often be also, in addition to being 3 years or less, the way it's done can actually make more sense than bonding for something.
Thank you. I
So
remember now too about
Yeah.
the years, how many years
Yeah.
it was.
I mean, I'm not disagreeing with Liz at all. I mean, I understand why. It just, when it comes to budget season to make cuts, that's just one line you you don't have an option on. I mean, it just is what it is. So if you're gonna cut me 50 grand, I can tell you the one line that can't get cut at all, and it's that. So it just makes the other lines that much more valuable. Now, I can also tell you, though, because of this, we will not be getting any cruisers next year. So we will now be skipping 2 years of marked cruisers. So when you start looking at the breakdown of vehicles, when we go into next year, the following year's budget, and I'm going to be looking at it, that lease number that I'm going to be asking for is probably going to be close to 200,000 for at least the first year to be able to get us back to where we were, because we missed years. When I came here, it had been years since they had done anything with vehicles. We had to spend an exorbitant amount of money just to get them back in vehicles that were running. As much as hybrids are the thing right now, they are highly unreliable right now. It's a new product. Those things are down constantly. I'm sure everybody heard about my car that didn't have an inspection sticker on it. There's nothing wrong with the car, but there's every light. It's a Christmas tree lit up in that dashboard. And the DPW, who are fantastic to us when it comes to fixing vehicles, they don't have the ability to deal with these new cars as of yet. So, which means they have to go back to the dealership. The dealerships can't figure out why these things have lights on. So our cars are sitting out there down right now because they can't tell us how to fix them. So they're not being driven. So that just means you're driving other cars more and pounding on them even more. So we're going to struggle next year. You're going to see a lot of down cars next year, and my number is going to be really big the following year. And it's just the way it is. That's all. I mean, it just is what it is.
Does anybody have any more questions for the chief?
I do.
Councilor DeSorga?
So, how many cars do we have? How many police cars do we have altogether? And when you retire one, like the ones that we're going to retire, how many miles do they have on them? And how old are they?
Yep. So right now, we have 19 total vehicles between marked cars and unmarked cars as of right now.
Okay.
When we get unmarked vehicles, what we typically do is we start at the top and we push our vehicles down. My vehicle and the deputy chief's vehicle, we don't typically use ours for a whole lot of patrol functions. So they get moved down to the lieutenants or the detectives or other we'll just call it non-patrol function vehicles. So that's how that transition goes. At some point here at the end of the life of these vehicles, because they're SUVs, they do fit the green plan, at some point, we wouldn't mind pushing some of these vehicles out. The unmarked vehicles last longer because they're driven less. They're not driven as hard. They're not responding to calls. So you typically I still have the unmarked vehicles in my fleet right now that I bought my first year here in 2013. They're still being driven on a daily basis. They're still functional vehicles because they just don't get the wear and tear. So we still have those. Now we have 4 of them right now from 2013, 2014 that we're driving right now as unmarked vehicles. On the marked vehicle side, those are our patrol vehicles. Those are the vehicles we're talking about where you get the wear and tear the most. Typically, every 3 years on those vehicles, after a 3-year lease is done, they're over 100,000 miles per car. At least.
Okay.
We try to only drive them 16 hours out of a 24-hour shift. We try to at least take 1 full shift off per car. We haven't been able to do that since we got the hybrids. Because I said, hybrids are constantly breaking down. We're first generation. I mean, we were one of the first departments to order them. We should have been the first department to get them, but we were the guinea pig because they found out when you drill the cages into them, you drill into the batteries. They weren't meant to have cages in them. So we didn't get ours for almost another year when we got them. But we're going to run out. So those will run about 100,000 miles or more. After that, you're just starting to pay money for something you shouldn't pay for anymore. What we try to do is we've taken kind of the best, we'll call it the best used vehicle we have, and we've turned it into our canine vehicle. Because the canine officer is now the only one driving it. It's going to last longer. So we took kind of the best of the worst and gave it to him. We have one for our comfort dog. That's one of the 2014s. But again, she's the only one that drives it. So that vehicle is going to last longer. The vehicles that are routinely used on patrol will only last 3 years of solid good work. You get 2 years out of them for a warranty. So by year 3, you start seeing those maintenance costs go up. And if you look at my budget, I have $15,000 for maintenance costs for our entire fleet. That's not that much, especially when you start talking that we're getting into 4 and 5-year-old vehicles that we're going to have to use on a regular basis. And again, the DPW is not equipped. And correct me if I'm wrong, Marlo, I don't want to throw you guys under the bus. I'm trying not to, but you're not equipped to handle the hybrid stuff right now, right?
That's correct. We have some software, but not equipped with the issues you're having.
Yeah, so we're now paying to send those back to Ford. We've had to trailer them back to Ford. We've had to send them to Ford to Greenfield, who can't figure it out, who then sends them to Ford in Northampton. The hybrids they're just tough. I mean, hopefully down the road they'll figure out a different way. But quite honestly, what we're finding out is hybrids weren't really meant to be driven like police cars. That's probably a lot of the reason for their problems. So we're getting into a point now that we're going to be driving 4-year-old cars, and I don't have any money to replace them. Just the reality of what it is. If that helps at all, Councilor.
Thank you.
No problem.
If I have a couple of quick questions.
Absolutely.
Going back to your salary and wage line items with the different types of pay and everything else that's on there.
Yep.
Could you tell us about body camera stipends? I'm thinking they're contractual, but I would like to know what that means.
Yes, they are contractual.
Yeah.
So this was part of the negotiations with the unions so that they wouldn't fight us on putting body cameras on. If you look at some of the other communities that are trying to get body cameras or did get them, we're getting off cheap in my mind. Our folks have been pretty unobjectable to wearing body cameras. I haven't had a whole lot of people that, if you had told me this about 10 years ago, I think I would have had a huge fight on my hands. Most people feel that there's more benefit than none, but you are adding a change to their duties. I'll be honest with you, it's going to be the administrative side. I can't wait to see that because that's going to be interesting. But that's all that is. That was part of the negotiation, so that way we don't have to fight about body cameras.
Okay. And my last question is usually about salary and wages. So I wondered if you could tell me how much you and Deputy Chief Gordon and your court officer, which are your 3 independent contracts, if you could tell us what it is that you make.
Sure. And I also just want to point out, and I can only speak to the patrol union because that's the one that settled. They didn't ask for any COLA increase either this year. So okay. They went 0 on the COLA. We dealt with the body camera issue. You know, they didn't put up too much of a fight. I appreciate that because they know that this year was going to be a tight year. But that's why that also was in play. So.
Thank you.
So as far as myself and the deputy chief, let me get back to my other page here. Give me one quick second and I will. Okay. So my base salary, as you look at it, is $153,663 is my base. The base pay for the deputy chief is $127,250. That is his base. There are other numbers that are in our contract to deal with other situations.
Correct. I understand that.
But as far as base, that is the base number.
Okay. And your court officer?
Yes. My court officer, court administrator, his base pay, and I'm just going to say this, I think he's underpaid for what he does, as I feel the same way about other people here, especially my records clerk who gets smoked, is $63,245. He is a bar certified attorney. He has some other contractual items in there, but that is his base salary, and it just went to that for this upcoming year.
Okay, thank you very much. If there are no more questions for the chief on the police budget, I'm going to move to the dispatch. Let's see, is that what we've got here?
And Liz was kind enough to send me that as well.
Okay, that's on page one. That's
Well,
page-
and I've got parking on deck and animal control. We're ready to roll.
Okay, we're good. Okay,
That is your police department.
All right, just give me 1 second here. I just want to make sure I have the right numbers for you, and then I can go. Okay. On the dispatch side, we have 10 full-time dispatchers. We currently do not have a dispatch manager, supervisor as of yet. It's in their contract. The reason for that is for the most part of the last year plus, we've barely had any employees. We got down to 4 full-time employees at one point in dispatch. To overcome that, we needed to put dispatchers with police officers or firefighters to make sure we still had people to answer 911 and that they weren't alone in there to handle the overload of what was coming in. On the police side, we sent police officers to dispatch training. I got admonished for that by the state. They let me get away with it this time. They will not let me get away with it again. They told me that my police officers, regardless of the fact they went to this one training, they didn't do the other one. So they weren't technically certified to sit in there. And my answer was somebody has to answer 911 calls. And the state really wasn't willing to help us. So what we ended up doing was we did a supplemental ask from the state. They gave us a one-time lump sum to deal with this year's issues with dispatching COVID because they weren't going to help us with any overflow. We are currently back up to staff. We have people working. I know when you look at our current dispatch numbers, it looks a little bit off because it looks like we have a lot of money in our salary and line items. The only reason we have that is because we didn't have anybody working. Not that money, was just extra money. We just didn't have anybody working in there. So that is why that number looks a little bit inflated for this year. Like we're going to have all this extra money. We might have some extra money this year. We will not have any extra money next year. It was a tough year for dispatch. My administrative lieutenant worked very hard with the state and with the dispatchers themselves to keep people here and keep people working, and it was rough. So with that being said, when you look at the number for the dispatch salary and wages, it's gone up a lot. So it looks, that's contractual. We did this intentionally because we need to retain employees. Their salaries were low to begin with, but they also took forever to get to the top. And we were losing people, and we weren't getting people because of it. Since we've done this, since we put this in place, we have had success hiring people. We've had people from central and eastern part of Massachusetts that have relocated out here to take jobs with us. For a period of time, we were losing people just to right next door. And to me, and nothing against the folks on the other side. Sorry, Danny. I don't want to lose anybody to Montague. I think we're a better department. I want to retain our folks here. So, but we were losing people. And so we needed to do something, and that was something drastic that we needed to do. And I think it was well worth it. They worked very hard. So with that, I didn't increase the part-time wages. This is for part-timers that come over. Now, when I say that, typically part-timers are full-timers at other departments. They're already certified. They come over. We hope that they work a shift or two. All of us have been in the same boat. It's really hard to have. But in case we have that, we continuously try to make sure we have those people. And again, everybody's in the same boat as us when it comes to staffing, so I don't really anticipate this monster influx of part-time dispatchers, but we do have some interest in it, so we're hoping that we might be able to bring 1 or 2 people on. The longevity pay, you see it went down a lot. That's strictly because the people that left actually had it. We lost, honestly, 2 of our, I don't want to say we knew they'd be career, but we felt they might be career. They were over 10 years, which in dispatch life, as Councilor Jarvis will admit, is a long time. If you can retain a dispatcher for 10 years, that's a miracle. But we lost 2 of them during COVID, and not for any bad reasons. One went back to school to do something different, completely understandable, and the other left for another job with the COG, and all in good terms. It's just they were long-term employees, so we lost some longevity there. The dispatch overtime is always woefully underfunded. I rely on grant money. I rely on the state 911 funding to come through. We don't get that up front. We're not guaranteed a figure. We know what we should get or what we may get. It depends upon calls for service. It depends on how many employees you have. And I have to caution about that. If they are not certified in the seats as of July 1 when the year starts on your payroll, you don't get the money for them. That's going to hurt us from this year when we get our money this year, which is why we went and asked for that additional one-time lump sum saying, look, we know they weren't in the seats this year, but this is why, this is what we had to do. Hopefully for July 1 of this year, all of our employees are still here. They will all get certified and we will get the money allotted for them. When I talk about the 911 grant, part of that grant is if we need equipment in dispatch, such as chairs, upgrade to systems, that's part of that. So anything you put into that grant comes out of the salary side of that grant. They don't give you on and above. So what I mean by that is if we need, say, 6 chairs for dispatch, and this is not a joking number when I give it to you, you're looking at $30,000 for chairs. Dispatch chairs typically cost around $5,000 or more. We are hopeful when we redesign our dispatch center, we're going to have ergonomic keyboards and ergonomic stands and other quality of life issues. We're going to have to pay for that. That's part of that build. But otherwise, we'd have to go to State 911 for it and ask for these monster numbers, and that will take away from our support and incentive for the actual employees. We don't want to do that. That money is crucial to just make sure we make it through the year. Typically, dispatch in overtime, it's over $100,000 a year when we have everybody on. We only budget for 50. As you saw from years before, I budgeted 37. That number doesn't even make sense. We just rely on that support and incentive by the end of the year that I can get the money that we have for the folks that work for us, and we can use that money where it should be. But again, like I said, this year it's going to be different because most of those folks weren't here on July 1 of last year. But again, we did that one time, beg and plead and borrow, and hopefully we'll be okay for next year. But so not a lot there. Shift differential, again, contractual. They weren't making a whole lot for their shift diff. We bumped that up. I still don't think that's a monster number, to be honest with you. So I think it's about $6,000 more than it was the year before. So not too bad. Holiday went up a little bit because we added some holidays. We had at least Juneteenth in there and some other things for 10 dispatchers. So that number is there. Incentive pay. I like this line because this is also, we should be wanting educated folks in our field. And this accounts for the people that have college degrees, and it's open-ended, which I also like, that if we can relate it to that field, because again, I'm not too worried about you having a criminal justice degree. Quite honestly, my criminal justice degree did nothing for me outside of get me 20% more when I was a patrol officer. A social work, a sociology, a psychology, quite honestly, anything in the social service field is better for police and dispatch, in my opinion. So if we can get folks that have those type of degrees, or maybe something different, like we had a young lady who just left us for NCIS down in North Carolina. Unbelievable move for her, right? But she spoke multiple Middle Eastern languages. Monstrous, right? She also had a degree in intelligence, and she's one of our dispatchers. She was amazing, trained up, and well, lost her real quick. But I also knew I was going to, because she had aspirations for other things, and obviously a very intelligent woman, and she got it. But those are the types of folks that we want to draw to our disciplines, and that I think will go a long way, having that incentive bet. And then maybe somebody that's sitting in that seat also feels better about going and getting a degree and continuing their education, and maybe stays with us and maybe doesn't, maybe goes somewhere else. I'm all about people wanting to better themselves, and if they feel it somewhere else, I'll support them all day long. I hope it's here, but I understand. You'll also see there's no expenses in dispatch. The police department absorbs all those. And there are dispatch expenses. A lot of the building repairs came from dispatch this year because we had leaks in the roof there. We had issues with these AC and heating in that area. So a lot of those, and just outside the dispatch area, so a lot of those costs came from that. Now, it's still our building, so I look at it that way. But when you start talking about computers breaking down in there, and that happens, we covered that on the police department side. So part of that overage that I explained about the computers on our side, some of that is dispatch. That's not all PD, but we cover that. So that's why you don't see any expenses. So I just caution when you look at cutting police expenses, you're actually cutting both departments in a way. So can I answer any questions? I think you're on mute, Counselor.
I'm
So,
always mute.
okay. You said there were 10 people, full-time people on dispatch.
Yes.
And one was a female.
Oh,
that
no,
left.
we have more than one female.
No, that was where I was going with that. That looks like that salary went up 20%, but we have other women that are doing dispatch.
Oh, yeah.
Is it about 50-50? I'm just curious.
Oh, I think I think we have three men working and 7 females. If I'm right, I think.
Mhm.
I could be off, but I don't.
That's
think
great. No, all
Yeah.
good. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Any Ways and Means members with any questions? Okay, I see the mayor and also the chief of staff have their hand up. So Mayor, go ahead.
Well, I
There goes
appreciate
first.
that. Chief of Staff Danielle Letourneau had her hand up before me, so I will defer to her, and then I'm happy to speak afterwards.
Okay.
I will take it because I don't think we're going to say the same thing. It's occurred to me during this budgeting process, and actually last year too, but since it came up under this item, obviously dispatch chairs are a very unique item because they're in it and the ergonomics are important. But I do want to point out that in the entire operating budget, you guys keep this in mind as you're looking through, there is no budget in most departments that's specifically for any of those things like shredding or furniture and equipment and chairs and ergonomics for any of us. So all of the departments, while they are trying to manage their budgets that are actually listed, are also trying to squeeze that stuff in. Every time we have a new employee start, we have to, send emails around to one another looking for a new chair because the one that was left behind is disgusting. And it occurred to me the other night when we were talking about the desks and things in the police department. I have whose desk do I have? It's from like the 80s. Whose desk or 70s? Who was the HR guy way back? Oh gosh, his name is escaping.
Dennis.
Dennis Helmus. I have his desk.
Oh,
That's all I want to say. So
excellent.
Which
when you're
I
keeping
think
in mind
used to
that-
be Mark Smith's desk.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, Mayor?
Yes. I hope you understand tonight, those of you who are on here from Ways and Means and from City Council, the passion with which the police chief speaks about his budget and the way in which he takes care of the people that work for him. So when you hear that the police chief's budget is inflated, I believe you have gotten from people that aren't on Ways and Means and maybe in the community, and I don't make a judgment about their motives. I just say that I think you understand that he does not have a deep bench. 34 police officers for a city of 17,768, I think, people is not a deep bench. He does not have an inflated budget. It includes not only the police department, but it includes, as you just, I don't think you even got to animal control or parking yet, but I think you're probably going to let it go. But it includes a lot of other things when you see that bottom line in the budget book. So he has spoken to you tonight about maintenance costs on his building that aren't really covered in his budget. And he has a building that, as we all know, is aging and needs repair. He's spoken to you tonight about many other aspects of his budget that somehow or other he manages to cover. But I'm just telling you this, and this is true for many departments. Going forward, at some point, we have to understand what it takes to run a city from a financial standpoint. And it's just very difficult to put together a budget that makes sense from the standpoint of how we do the budget, what it really takes to run a city. I think Danny just gave you a great picture of that. When the odd time that we do get to hire someone, we literally wander around the buildings and we say, oh, that looks like a halfway decent chair. And, oh, where are we going to put this person? Well, we're going to put them here, and it's not an optimal room. So there's just a lot. We do great with the money we have, and I'm very much want to be someone who puts forward a budget that the city of Greenfield can afford. But there's going to come a point in time when it's going to be very difficult to actually do what we need to do to protect the citizens, to provide them services with this budget that we have been having to do for the next few years, because things are not getting any cheaper. But I want to bring it back to the police department and just say thank you, Chief Haig, for your presentation this evening.
I appreciate that, Mayor. Just real quick, because I don't want to be I would hate to be accused of anything. We do have a slight amount of expenses, but they do deal with people. We have, as you'll see, there's a clothing allowance that's contractual. That went up a little bit because we spoke during union negotiations about if we're going to be, redesigning this dispatch center, and we're looking to continue to professionalize ourselves. Part of that discussion was presentation by dispatch. And if we're going to ask these folks to wear uniforms that we've worked out together, something comfortable enough, because quite honestly, they're trapped in there, and I wouldn't expect them to be, wearing button-down uniforms like we do, but we need to pay them for that. We need to cover that expense if that's what we're going to do. So there was a little bit of a clothing allowance that was part of the negotiation. That went up just a little bit, and the dispatch uniforms, the money for that is really just to get new hires started when they come in. We have contracted, same on the PD side, we've contracted with a company that holds all of our patterns and all of our emblems, and they will have the ability to order direct from them with approved items. So we're not going to have random items just being bought. I don't want people to think that they're getting, why does dispatch need clothing? Well, because they're part of the emergency support system in this community. They want to look professional, and we should want them to look professional, and they need to be paid for it. And this is, again, just to provide clothing for them so that they have, when they're sitting there 5 days in a row, they have nicely worn and comfortable clothing that represents our department the way we all as a city want. So that's the little bit of the expense that's in there. So I don't want somebody thinking I didn't talk about the expenses, but that's the physical expenses. Again, police department, we take care of that.
Yeah, dispatch definitely needed that morale boost, as you've heard.
100%, and they've earned it. They work hard. They really do.
Thank
I
you.
want to thank the 4 people that stayed through this whole time, because that could have been uglier than it was, to be honest with you. So
Chief, thank you. Can we move along quickly with parking?
I can put parking and animal control, no problem. Yeah, parking really quick. This is very easy. It's a little bit of me, a little bit of Marlo, but at the end of the day, on my side of things, for the most part, salary, I've got currently a couple of part-time people that are working. We've always kicked around hiring more people. The reason we didn't was during COVID. We had a lot of different issues going on, whether we were not paying for parking, we were paying for parking. A lot of different things happened. But I want to leave that money in there because I think we do need to move back to looking at staffing it, because let's face it, that revenue does bring in money for the community and also pay for a parking garage that we have. So I think we need to revisit that now that we're outside of COVID. So that number's pretty small. And again, we used to have one full-time person and a couple part-time people. Right now, just a couple part-time people, but I'd like to get back to that full-time person. Other than that, the rest of the stuff that's down below on the expense side of things, they, as I say every year, are guesses. And we have a couple of contracts and stuff, but we don't know what breaks down, what doesn't. But typically, we're okay in that category. So that's where that's at. If there's any questions on parking, I can do it. Yep.
Councilor Jarvis?
Just one comment, and it's kind of a thorn in my thigh every time I food for thought next year. I know the budget's tight, but I'd like to see our parking enforcement people have a little bit better uniform budget so they look a little bit more professional out on the street. It's kind of like my thorn in my thigh. I was always a strong believer in my white shirt and in my office. So I think we need to kind of step that up a little bit, because to me, it looks a little bit unprofessional to me, but just me. I mean, it could just be me being older. I don't know.
I don't totally disagree with you. And we did, and we kind of got away from it a little bit during COVID, and we need to reel it back a little bit. So I understand.
Okay. On to animal control.
Animal control, very quickly. We pay for half of animal control. Montague and Deerfield split the other half. We get the majority of the services, obviously. I bill out to them quarterly, I think it is still, for shared expenses. So we do get at least half of all the expenses from the combination of Montague and Deerfield. It's a 3-year contract. I believe it's up next year, or this year, I should say, going into next year. I think we're going to have to renegotiate. So what you're seeing on our side is just our half of his contractual salary, because he is still a union contract employee in Greenfield. So they just contribute to what his union salary, wages, benefits are in Greenfield, and we get half from them. So what you're seeing is just our half.
Okay. Any further questions?
I have further questions.
Go ahead.
Unfortunately, I still have more questions. On the parking, I asked this earlier. I had received a lot of complaints about sidewalks that weren't shoveled. And the parking enforcement, it looks like we pay $143,000 for parking enforcement, and we took in like roughly $200,000. Do the parking enforcement people leave the center of town to be checking the sidewalks? And what money I put this in writing, what revenue we took in from tickets for sidewalks that weren't shoveled?
I can't answer the revenue side of things. I don't know. Typically, parking enforcement, yes, would get in a car and do that. We did not have anybody to do that this year. We didn't have anybody to do that for most of COVID. We didn't have a whole lot of complaints, I have to be honest with you. There are some other issues. You can bill all you want. It doesn't mean they're going to pay. And typically what we see with sidewalks that aren't shoveled, and while I completely agree with you, that's annoying, typically we find out that it's either a bank-owned property, it's an abandoned property, or you have an absentee landlord, and trying to get them to respond to you, especially when they're not local, is brutal. I know that the DPW on occasion has helped us, when they're really not supposed to. They have helped us when we've run into situations where we had one, I think Marlo will remember this, we had one gentleman who was in a wheelchair, automatic wheelchair, and we knew he needed to go on the road. Marlo sent some folks over, we got it cleaned up for him. But typically that's not the response or the responsibility of us. But when it comes to safety, I think we do a good job of trying to address those safety concerns. I don't have a good answer for you right now on how to fix that or adjust it when it comes to those unplowed sidewalks. It really isn't a police function. It has always been typically a function of the parking enforcement. We just didn't have any staffing for it. I have one parking enforcement person that doesn't drive. And that was the person I had on for all of COVID. I didn't have staffing. So I'm not trying to make excuses for it. I'm just trying to explain why that didn't happen. That's all. I'm not saying it shouldn't happen. I'm just saying I didn't have someone to make it happen. But on the revenue side, I apologize, Counselor. I don't know what the revenue taken was for that.
So follow up, if I may, Counselor
Sure.
Forgy. So I would like to know what that was. If I'm just saying that out loud, I'd like to know what it was. I had sent something to, I think to the mayor's office, but
Yeah,
I know to you because there was a suggestion from someone in Northampton. 50% of our properties, or 47, are rental units. And I think that's where the non-shoveling of the sidewalk usually occurs. And I said there were municipalities that sent a $300 bill and then to the offending person, and then DPW shoveled the sidewalk if it wasn't done by the next morning. And because the fee was so high, the shoveling started, and we have a huge percentage of people who are disabled. So I'm just saying that again. But I do want to know at some point what the number was. I see somebody has, that's up to
Danny, go ahead.
4G.
Danny, go ahead.
I'm like dying here. So I have been putting together, and it's not ready for prime time, a spreadsheet of data from all the different places we collect parking data. And so that going forward, I'll be able to update it on a monthly and quarterly basis. One of the things that I've looked at is, and I can get you that actual number, I think, but is total citations. I just sent you guys a graph with the trends. I sent it to Ways and Means and CC Tammy. But essentially, I looked through that data, Councilor DeSorga, the vast majority, and I mean the vast majority of our parking enforcement, of our citation dollar amounts is for those $10 tickets. Like when you start going through that spreadsheet, which I did because I'm a weirdo, very, very few are those higher amounts that are something else. I also looked at neighboring communities and peer communities to see what they are doing. So yeah, we have some of that information now, and some of which I'm bringing to parking and traffic. But I know that when we get somebody who either is a very visible spot or is a serial offender of the snow removal, they call the mayor's office. And when they call the mayor's office, we always would send out somebody to either write the ticket or take care of it. Those are not as frequent as you would imagine, but they did happen a few times. And once we got the second parking enforcement person back on, the one who drives, she was more than happy to drive over and issue a ticket. So that's an issue that has come up. It's true, but it really, I don't think it's as widespread as it seems, but we're working on making sure to get all that data. If that answers your question.
If I can follow up, Councilor Forgy, there's no other time for us all year to ask about this. And I see it as a huge problem in the city. I know that we have a lot on our agenda tonight, but when else would we be bringing this up? And I just think it's very important because people can go so far and then they have to go out in the middle of the street. If you had a mobility issue, you'd be dead meat. So I just wanted to emphasize that that was important while we were all here together. So my last, I have two more questions. I ask every department head if they have a revolving account that's associated with their department. Yours is a $5,000 one that's for the sale of property, confiscated property, etc. Did you get $5,000 worth of property? Is that something that you get every year? And what do
Oh,
you
no.
use your 5,000 for?
No, we set that number because that's if we send things to auction, like through court, if we have, items, evidence, that kind of thing that is forfeited to us. That doesn't happen very often. That number is basically, I don't want to say mythical, but that number is what we potentially could anticipate. I'm not exactly sure we've ever hit that, to be honest with you. And we certainly didn't hit it over the last couple of years with COVID. But that's what that is. So that way, when we do auction, we have a place to put that money.
Okay. And my last question is, how much did we get for a grant for the body cameras?
Oh boy, exact number. I want to say for the equipment themselves, it was somewhere around $70,000. I think it was up there. But we went for the whole. Same thing we did when we went with the body cam. Cruiser cameras. We went for the best of the best and all the equipment to go with it. And we got it. And that includes, server based, which eventually have to go cloud based. If we wanted cloud based, it would have been triple, just on our side of things. But I believe this was a server based that allows us at some point, if we have the money, to convert to cloud based. But yeah, that was for everything. I'm sure there will be a few little costs. The grant does not cover the internet. However, that's why that number on our phone side, for like I explained, for the cradle points they're called for the cruisers, that's not covered by the grant.
Thank you very much for answering all those questions. I really
My
appreciate
pleasure.
it. I'm very grateful.
Okay,
Is that
we're
right,
all
Chris?
set. No more questions or comments for the
I just had
chief.
one more comment, Chris, if I could.
Okay, Mike, I can't see you, but go right ahead.
Right. No, I wanted to point out, I really think, even as the mayor was pointing out, and I think your descriptions tonight to go along with these, chief, have been very, very good in explaining the differences. When right now, looking at this, we're not going back 5 years, we're not going back 6, 7 years. And I think obviously everybody expects, COLA, natural increases like that to affect everything. With the last 2 years being that much different, more different than a typical 2 to 3 year period would be. Kind of the reason why I was asking you the initial questions I asked was if people out there are wondering why these numbers would look as skewed as they may, I think it's important to ask those and have them answered. And I definitely appreciate the answers, because we are only looking at 3 years worth of data right now, versus going back deeper, and a lot has changed. So I just wanted to point that out. When comments out there have been, whether it's this budget or other budgets have been, inflated or seem ridiculous. We ran into this with capital and certain things with construction costs. There's a whole lot of factors that are going into play with making these budgets that, to the layman doesn't seem like they're reasonable or that they have basis. But I just wanted to reiterate that there's a lot of other considerations that go into these, that make it appear maybe less, I don't know what word I want to use there, but they may appear a little skewed. And I appreciate the time put in to try to fit everything that you can in there, because it's and not just your department, but all the departments right now are struggling with this, and it's not just here. So I just wanted to point that out.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is everybody all set with Chief Haig for this evening? Okay, that's fabulous. Once again, Chief, thank you so much for being with us. It was a very in-depth explanation. I'm looking and seeing counselors listening, So I'm hoping that'll go a long way when we bring this out to council floor. Thank you once again for being with us this evening, and we'll see you soon, I'm sure.
I'm gonna hop back on as soon as I get home and support my fellow department heads. But if I'm disappearing for a little bit here, that's for the trip home. So thank you, everybody.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Chief Hague, very much. Okay, thank you, everybody. We're going to move forward now in our next budget. To be presented is our fire department budget. We have Chief Strand with us this evening. Chief, thank you. Welcome. It's a pleasure as always. Would you like to talk about your budget and let us know what's on your mind?
Sure. First of all, can you hear me well? I'm using my phone. My mic on my camera has not been working well. So,
Okay, we can hear you.
good. So first of all, thank you for having all of us here tonight to discuss these budgets. Budget is always challenging, whether it's operating or whether it's capital. We prepare budgets months before it goes into effect, and as we see on occasion, they change. So it's already been highlighted once, such as fuel. Nobody saw the increase in fuel that we've seen. So we do our best job to try to predict, but we're not always the best. But I want to thank everybody for having me here. And I also wanted to do a special shout out to Liz Gilman behind the scenes. This may be her last budget with us, but without her, it definitely could have been more challenging. So, and I want to thank the mayor as well for supporting our budget and bringing it forward to City Council. So, our budget is for full-time, 24-hour, 7-day-a-week coverage of fire and rescue services for the City of Greenfield. Our department has 24 firefighters and officers on the floor, as we call it, the shift that respond on the calls. We have 4 administrative day folks that also respond on calls, but are geared more towards keeping the place running. And we have 8 call firefighters at this time. We are responsible for fire suppression, obviously, for the community, but that is a small portion of what we do. We also provide EMS and rescue services, code enforcement and inspections, administrative duties, keeping the place running, hazardous response, and emergency management. So we are the agency that typically people call when they don't know who to call. And so we get calls for a gamut of reasons. Excuse me. But my firefighters do a great job and are ready to serve the community with whatever we're tasked for. Just to give you, and I say this every year, but in one of these years, I'm going to get to the point, hopefully, where this isn't true. But every year is our busiest year in regards to call volume. This past year was no exception. We were up quite a bit on our responses. And so when I first started the department, there were 7 firefighters on a shift, and we were doing about 1,000 calls a year. Fast forward to this year, and we are at 6 firefighters on a shift, and we topped about 3,200 emergency calls. So quite a bit of a difference in our response. So our budget is focused on trying to be as level with services as we can, with trying to address some shortcomings that we know within our budget, specifically our overtime side of the budget. In order to, and I'll get into more details in a little bit on this, but in order to maintain 5 firefighters on duty at all time, it is a costly endeavor. And not only a salary, but to keep shifts at their full strength, especially past year, has been very challenging and very difficult. And so our overtime has reflected that, and I'll get into more details should everybody request it. We do track our overtime by categories, and we can tell you exactly what we're spending on shift fills, what we're spending on callbacks, and we can even break it down to as type of emergency and what it costs for us in the overtime situation. We do provide a lot of mutual aid, and that has always been a question, so I'll answer it now. I will speak for the first 6-7 months of this fiscal year. We gave out 21 fire responses to our neighbors. That is a single engine that responds out of town on mutual aid. We received at the same period 27 different companies that came into Greenfield. And so we receive more mutual aid historically, it's always been this way, historically, than we give out. The difference is that when we have a fire, a routine fire that requires mutual aid, one fire can be 5 mutual aid companies that come in. But when we go out, we're giving one company at a time. So that's where our mutual aid is. And I will leave it at that because I know we'll try to shorten it up, and I'll take, if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Okay, thank you, Chief. To members of Ways and Means, do you have any questions for Chief Strand?
I do.
Okay,
Councilor
Councilor
Forgy.
DeSorger.
So what are the 4 administrators? Is that, do you include yourself in one of those? Would that be, and who else? What are the other positions?
So
Chief?
these are sworn positions, Counselor. There is Chief of Department. There is the Captain of Fire Prevention, who is responsible for code enforcement, inspections, investigations, and then there is a Captain of Operations and a Lieutenant of Operations, and their job is wide. It's pretty vast in what they do. They coordinate vehicle repairs, building repairs, order equipment. The list goes on and on of what these 2 individuals do for us on a daily basis. We do not have a deputy chief. We haven't had a deputy chief since my good friend Councilor Jarvis left. I still swear under my breath that he left because he was invaluable. But we have not replaced the deputy chief. We, like Chief Haig mentioned, really are concentrating on putting the effort into maintaining the shift strength. Like Chief Haig said, those are the folks that keep the community safe. Now, the day staff are not just administrative. They are response capable as well, and often during the daytime respond on a gamut of emergencies with the shift strength. Our heaviest call volume is between the hours of 9 in the morning and 8 o'clock at night. And so having the administrative staff, if you will, provides me extra bodies to put on day-to-day emergencies, which seems to be never.
More questions?
So if I could, Counselor, I just want to highlight, give you some numbers. It's going to make your head spin a little bit, but it's important that I think the numbers are presented. And that is, in order to maintain 24-hour coverage 7 days a week, there are 43,000 man hours needed to cover the Greenfield Fire Department at its basic need. The average firefighter last year, now this is the average, and it's going to look a little high, but we had multiple people on long-term disability, IOD claims. We had 3 individuals that were out on family medical leave for the birth of a new child. But I took all the leave that was given and divided amongst the shift that was there. And we averaged about 477 hours per firefighter off. That seems a little high, but remember, I have multiple folks that were gone for months at a time factored in with that. If you take that average time and you subtract it from what is available, what's available is, with all our staff, we have 52,000 hours of assigned time on for all of us. subtract that 477, which is 11,000, that gives us about 40,000 hours of working hours that we know of. Okay. Remember, I said it was 43,000 hours to maintain 5 people. With a time off, and we have 40,000, that gives us a deficit, a known deficit of over 2,000 hours that we know we're going to pay in overtime. This was that without any other circumstances, emergencies and stuff. We know as a department we're going to do about 2,500 to 2,700 hours of overtime. That goes into $127,000 to maintain 5-man minimum of known cause. Never mind all the other stuff that I added on that. So when you look at my overtime's a huge number. But if you look at any fire department across the Commonwealth that is, or across the country that is a staffed 24-hour-a-day operation, overtime is always high. But our overtime is pretty high. This particular year, with all the leaves that we've had, we lost 2 lieutenants. One lieutenant went back to his hometown to be a firefighter. Another lieutenant had aspirations of moving up further in rank and went on to a different department where that is going to be a reality for him. With those shortcomings, with the leaves that we had, our overtime has absolutely been destroyed to a point that I've never seen before. There's going to be an order that is coming across for City Council to adjust our ambulance revenue account to take up the overage in overtime. So I am still optimistic, although fuel is a challenge and we are overspent in fuel right now. I'm still optimistic that we're hoping to, with that, if that's approved, bottoming out at the end of this fiscal year. I hope I didn't throw too many numbers at you, but I think it's important to understand that, for our minimum, it takes 43,000 man hours to staff the fire department. It's just simple math.
Councillor DeSorger?
Did we increase the number of firefighters? There's a significant increase between the adopted salaries in fiscal year 22.
Yeah.
It was 1893665, and now it's 2139841. Did we increase?
So, great question. The majority of that increase is contractual. Was a contract that was signed last year that had an impact on this budget, and then translates into next year's budget. There is an additional position within that budget of 1 additional firefighter at the half-year mark. Okay, so in January there is 1 position within the department. I had asked for 4 to really have an impact, positive impact on our overtime, where we're not going to overexpend our overtime. We need to add staffing. We need to add staffing in general to get back to the 7-man shift or 7-person shift that was the case when I first got on the department. But this, between the contract and budget situation and whatnot, unfortunately, we're not able to do that this year. We are adding a half-time position. The rest of the increase is contractual.
So you asked for 4 and you got a half. Okay, got it.
I got 1. It's at the half-year mark. Listen, you'll see that in my budget we had to make further reductions within the operating budget to help the city get into a balanced budget. And I know it was a difficult decision at all levels to get to where we are, but we are adding that position at the halfway mark. And I should mention, and I forgot to mention, because we'll talk about this with the ambulance revenue, but the ambulance revenue has been bringing in enough revenue that we are taking a position July 1st and adding the position out of the ambulance revenue account. Now, when you add a position out of a revolving account, you not only have to pay for the salary, but you have to take all the benefits. Our ambulance has been successful enough where not only are we adding a firefighter out of that revenue account, but we're also paying for a new ambulance that will be delivered, that was approved a budget ago, and it's helping us out with the overtime overages that we have now. So our ambulance has been very successful, beyond the expectations that we initially had.
Thank you.
Counselor Forgy, do you want me, I had questions on that revolving account. Do you want me to ask that now?
Sure, go right ahead.
Okay, so that was a significant, that was a huge increase. Oh, do I have the page? It's
Counselor,
okay, go ahead.
the easiest answer to that is that significant increase is over $85,000 for the new firefighter's position. Remember, you're not only taking in the salary of the firefighter, but all the firefighter's benefits, including the clothing allowance, longevity, holiday, all of that rolled into, plus benefits, insurance, everything that the cost for that firefighter is being borne just on that ambulance revenue account.
Chief?
Yep.
Why don't you talk about how you're going to take on more calls too, to increase the revenue?
Yeah, so thank you for that. So we work closely with a private provider in town. It's Emergency Medical Response, or AMR, and we provide backup to them. But we basically share the EMS services for the City of Greenfield collectively between the two agencies. One agreement that we have made with the ambulance provider is we have determined through studies that a basic level EMT is more appropriate to respond on the routine motor vehicle accidents within the city. Obviously, if it's a significant accident, then the paramedics will still respond. But we've determined that because of the nature of that type of call, and it warrants a basic life support ambulance, which Greenfield Fire Department is licensed to, we have assumed that responsibility with the city. So if there is a motor vehicle accident with injuries, the fire department automatically goes, today. The difference is that we will be the primary transport agency. That additional small amount of work anticipates the revenue to increase to cover about half of the cost of the new firefighter.
Can I follow up on that, Councilor Forgy?
Yes.
So I think it was like 580 something thousand that was left in that account. And you wanted to increase the spending limit on it. Is that going to continue? First of all, is it going to continue to pay for that extra firefighter year after year? That's the plan?
That's the intent. Yep.
Okay. And so if there's 500 and something and we have to pay the ambulance out of it, there's other things that we are looking at even maybe a year from now. I see something else that's in the capital plans. Can you pay for your leases, for any other fire equipment? If we increase that so that you were just spending it? Because it comes back into the general fund and then would just tax, no, the half of it. Half of it?
No.
It's this 580 something thousand, and I'm certain I can see everybody nodding their head no, so I obviously know that I've gotten something wrong, and that's fine. It's probably the first mistake I've made today. So there's 580 something. Does that all stay there and you can just spend 280 something?
Yeah.
So great
if we
question.
allow that much, if we allow that increase?
Yeah, so let me break that down in a couple steps. So first of all, when we started the ambulance service, we purchased used ambulances. We nickeled and dimed everything to get the service up to a point where it was going to be hopefully help pay for itself. And it has been successful over the years, but that 500,000 is about 4 years worth of work that put into the point where we're able to invest enough into that to help it pay for itself. And so the revenues that we anticipate collecting will be slightly more than the expenditures of it. But the whole goal that I had back when we instituted this program was to try to make the ambulance as self-sustaining as we can. And so all the medical supplies that go on the ambulance, the stretcher, any medical device that we need, the cost of the ambulance itself, the overtime that it costs to run the ambulance, and now a position within the department that's going to help us offset the overtime for the rest of the budget. We have gotten to a point where we've been so successful that we're able to do that and build on that without taxing the taxpayer through the operating budget. But I want to point out that if you look at the revolving account there, it's not just, spending money out of the account. There is a budget for it, and it is spelled out within the revolving account what is being asked for to be able to spend out of that account.
Got it. And while we're on this, you have one more. You have fire department. You have fire prevention, 40,000 balance available for expenditures. Did you spend that last year?
We spend a portion of it, Counselor. There's part of that revolving account, and that is fees and services that the department provides, such as permitting and things like that. That is how we buy the smaller vehicles. That's how we've been able to purchase the smaller vehicles for the last 15, 20 years. The unfortunate part is that we haven't utilized it in that way within the last several years up until the newer lease that we got a year ago that will be coming offline and will be paid for. And because we fell behind, that's where the capital request went that you were referring to earlier.
Okay.
And so normally we get a 3-year lease for a vehicle. Because we fell so far behind, I have to purchase 2 vehicles. And in order to purchase 2 vehicles to stay within the spending cap and the revenue that's brought in, I have to extend the lease out between 4 and 6 years.
Okay. And lastly on that, what is your balance in that account?
Give me 1 second and I will get it for you.
Yeah.
And then you'll all be glad I'm going to be silent. Okay? No more questions for a few minutes.
Okay.
Can't help myself. This is our big chance to ask these.
Liz, I'm not finding it in the paperwork that you sent me. Do you have it offhand by any chance?
I can only look at the order. Eunice is actually down. It was a good thing I sent reports.
That's okay. We don't have to answer that right now. I just would like to know what it was. I know the other one's about 586, and I thought just what is it in there? And that's all. I'll be silent now for a while.
Counselor, I will get back to you, but I think we try to maintain about 60,000 in there.
I'd say it's actually less than that. I'm pretty sure I wrote it on the capital financial order, which would be fairly close. But
I did see that somewhere. It's just that's in another pile.
Yeah,
I know. I'm trying to
in my
find.
tidy home.
Everything is not working tonight. Let me tell you.
Yeah, I was having
It
difficulty.
was very slow, and then I got booted out. You know what? I'll get it and send it to you when I can reconnect, because I don't want to keep holding up everyone.
Thank you both. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I apologize, but I think it's between 40 and 60 that's in there right
Yeah,
now.
I think it's very-
It's such a small one that I forgot to bring it with me. So,
Members of Ways and Means, more questions? Councillor Jarvis?
More of comments than questions.
Sure.
And the chief can nod his head if I'm right or wrong, or when you said a new position, that's filling a position that's attrition, right? Not one that's not a new position. I just wanted other counselors to realize that we're not hiring a new position, we're just filling a vacant position.
Yeah, our goal is to get the initial goal is to get the shifts back to the minimum of 7 firefighters shift. With the changes and being creative, and I must point out that this is on the hard work of the firefighters. That we are adding 2 of the 4 into the budget. One of them's coming halfway through the year. The other one's coming right at the beginning through the ambulance revenue account.
Okay, and the other point I'd like to point out is you keep on saying 7. Well, in 1990, the study that we had done because of increased injuries to firefighters in our jobs, the number came back as 7, and we were doing about 700 calls then, and we're doing 4 times the amount of calls now, and we're still not maintaining that 7. That's just a point I wanted to bring out. And chief, when I started, we did 400 and something calls a year. And let me say, I appreciate everything you guys do and your department does. We started off just fighting fires. You guys do a whole gamut of high angle rescue, hazmat, swift water rescue. I will blow the fire department's horn because that's where my love is and that's where my passion is. So, I fully support your budget. I wish we could give you more. And I do have to point out that the desk, Danny was talking about things being reappropriated. The mayor's desk came from the deputy chief's office, and that happened when Deputy 4G retired, and Councilor 4G saw the desk and said, that looked good in the mayor's office. So that's where that desk came from. I just like to point out that whole story of events. So thank you for all you do, Chief. Thank you for the guys. We appreciate them. They work hard. Firefighting and EMS is a task enforced, tiring job to do. And it's a young man's job. That's why I'm out of it. And I appreciate everything you and your men do. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. You highlighted something that I was going to get to at the end, and that is that the work and the success of this department has been solely on the firefighters. I happen to work with a tremendous group of individuals that are smart and driven and committed, love the community and love the job that they do. I've never in my time, in my 23 years, have had a group of dedicated firefighters that we have now. I'm sure that there were, but they're just amazing. My day staff, for example, I have to tell them to go home at night. That their families are going to kill me if they don't go home. So the group of firefighters that we have across the board, they're just amazing. I'm proud of them, and they serve this community very well.
Thank you. Councilor Toronzo, do you have any questions or comments you'd like to share?
I had a very curious, weird question, but it was bizarre for me to see that the budget for gas went down significantly from 21. Was that just, I don't know, wishful thinking before we got to 4 something a gallon? Or
yeah, so I do a budget. I go by each line item and I find out what we spend in each of the line items, and then I try to compare over the last, 3 to 5 years. And so that was the average that we were spending.
Okay.
And then I submitted the budget, and war happened, and the cost of fuel went significantly higher. And like I said, we do our best to try to project based off of known facts that we have at our disposal. We usually get there are exceptions where we get it wrong. This one being one of them. The cost of materials to build a building is another one.
Sure. No, that was really my only question. I just thought it was like a, it was like an anomaly to watch something go down.
So we did make several reductions within the budget because there was the need to try to balance out the overall budget, and our request was extremely high. So we did have to make some reductions in some of the line items.
Chief, if I may, I have a couple of questions for you. Can you, on the permanent salary and wages part-time line item, can you tell me what that's for?
That's a great question, Counselor. Thank you for asking that. That's my call force.
Thank you. Thank
pays
you.
firefighters for the call force. I just will take 2 seconds to highlight this because this is something I'm pretty proud of. Our call force used to meet twice a month collectively as a call force to drill and to become proficient in their skills. Although that worked well for years past, we found a way that works a little bit different. And so what we did was we took the 8 firefighters that we have just put on the department and we split them up. So 2 firefighters are assigned to each shift. And that firefighter will drill with that shift. We'll call that shift and set up a drill time twice a month to come in, and they become more cohesive as a fire department rather than a call force and a permanent force. Our permanent force has embraced that. The shifts all know that their firefighter is responsible to that group, and so they work hard to make sure that their firefighters are up to speed and ready to go. It's been a great transition for us, and looking forward to seeing the results down the road.
Thank you. I'd forgotten all about the call for us. That's exciting. My final question is contractual pieces, what the salary line items would be for people that have contracts with the mayor. Is it only you?
So that's easy. That is only me.
Okay.
My office manager is under the S unit, and is covered under that contract, and all the firefighters and all the rank up to deputy chief, which I don't have one, is covered by the collective bargaining unit.
Okay. And what is your full-time salary?
For next year, fiscal year 23, it will be 132 or 135.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions from Ways and Means for the chief before we say good evening?
Yes.
Councilor DeSorga?
I have a question, a comment. What line item was the call fire force?
It's the part-time.
Okay. And I wanted to say thank you also. I happened to be lucky enough to actually meet and work alongside of most of the firefighters when we were doing the vaccine clinic. You have an incredible staff. And I think that you've showed us the increasing number of calls every year. So thank you very, very, very much.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we've touched upon everything within the budget. Are we going to look at ambulance separately? Let me see.
If you do, it is a big part now of operations. So out of the call volume we have, about 1,200 is emergency medical response, and out of and then there's about 700 transports. So transports, when we transport a patient, we bill the insurance company. That is where the revenue source is that comes in for the ambulance revenue account. And give me 1 second to find the page here. 66. And I'm turning to the revenue, the accounts under page 66. Which is page 64. And I appreciate you taking the time to highlight this, because this has turned into a very big portion of what we do at the fire station. So salaries, full-time salaries is at 55,000. The ambulance stipend is 6,500. The longevity pay is 1566. Overtime, self-explanatory. Anything that revolves around the ambulance overtime, that's where that overtime category comes in. Recall for primary transport. There is a special negotiated item within the contract, so that meets that. I do believe that going to be a lot less than the 9,000, but it's our first year with it, so I need to monitor it closely. Holiday pay, contractual, all costs to hire the firefighter, including the clothing allowance. The health insurance, you'll see that we're paying the health insurance fringe on that. Billing services, in order to send a bill to Medicare or an insurance company, we contract a ambulance billing company to do the work for us. Administratively, we wouldn't be able to handle it. Maintenance, self-explanatory. ALS intercepts, if we go, we are a basic level crew. If we go on a high acuity call that requires paramedics, if the paramedics are not available through the city, it could be another agency such as South County, Coleraine Ambulance, or Northfield that could be called to give us a hand. There is a fee associated with that should that happen. Medical supplies, self-explanatory. EMS training, self-explanatory. And then the ambulance lease, after July 1st, we will receive our first ever spec'd out, designed, and purchased ambulance for the fire department. Pretty proud moment from where we started with what we lovingly referred to as the Orange Pumpkin. That was our first ambulance from Pennsylvania that we picked up. So.
All right. Any questions on our ambulance service for the chief?
I have one.
Councilor DeSorga?
This one.
Guys,
So we have there's one person, is that one person, salary, wages, and full-time for the ambulance service? Is that
For July 1, yes, ma'am.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
If I might, looking at this wrong? Is this solely paid through the revolving fund?
Yes.
Wow. All right.
Based on projected revenues collected and work that has been done historically, and the increase in work call volume that I was telling you about, yes, it is all paid for out of that one account. When I initially let me rephrase that. When the department initially started the ambulance service back in 2014, we projected that the revenue collected would be about $40,000 a year. We are well over $200,000 a year.
all right.
It was an impressive. I used to see that.
You know, in the fire service, we've had to figure out ways that has been able to contribute to the budget. And the ambulance is a huge one. And it wouldn't have been possible without the firefighters that we have. Every firefighter, with the exception of one, is an EMT. The collective bargaining unit has now made it so everyone in the department, except for that one individual, has to be an EMT. It is a job requirement when we hire folks. With the changes we've made to civil service, our candidate pool is going to be huge when we open up advertisement for this position. So we're looking forward to it, and it comes at a perfect time. We have an individual that's on military leave that is going to potentially be leaving us for 6 months, and this position will fill his position while he's gone. So it comes at not a moment too soon.
Excellent. Thank you. If we are all set and there's no more questions or comments for the chief.
We have one more budget?
We do. We have one more budget. That would be the emergency management budget.
Real simple. The emergency management budget has a small part-time position, about $5,000, that we do not have filled. We have not filled it because of COVID, but it is a EOC manager that will report directly to the director, which is myself. I am the director of emergency management. The remainder of that budget is the majority of it pays for the reverse 911 system that we utilize heavily with the public safety agencies to recall off-duty firefighters and police officers if need be. That's the majority of the cost. And then there is a cost for insurance for the emergency services drone program. The insurance for the drones is its own part of the overall insurance package, but we pay for that out of that section within the budget.
Thank you, Chief. Any questions? All
Um,
right,
What, I have another one.
Councilor
There's
Sargis.
always one more. This is back on the ambulance. The ambulance stipend, is that for a person or is that, what is that?
That is, you know something, you caught me a little befuddled on that one. I believe that is the EMTs get a certain stipend for longevity on the ambulance, so that is built into that.
That's it. Thank you very much.
Yep.
Okay, looks like we've completed the presentation from Chief Strand for the Fire Department. Chief, thank you very much for being with us this evening, taking the time to explain the budget. Again, it'll make it much easier when we're on council floor and we're discussing all of these things. And we hope that we'll see you then that evening as well.
Correct.
And thank you again for your good work and for the department's work as well. We appreciate it.
If I could, just before I go, I just wanted to say thank you for the support of the mayor's office and the city council. We have made decades worth of work possible within the last, several years. And it wouldn't have been possible without the support of the mayor's office, Liz and Danny, and then the follow through with the city council. The support that the city has given this department has been overwhelming, and we thank you very much for the continued support that everybody's been giving this department. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to our next agenda item, we have the DPW budget for fiscal year 2023. I'd like to welcome DPW Director Marlo Werner to our meeting. You've been very patient, Director. We really appreciate it. It's not easy to sit through 2 hours. And now it's up to you. And we'd like to hear what you have to say about your budget. And let's see how this proceeds. If we are all getting a little punchy, we may want to continue this on our Wednesday evening meeting. But if things are going along fine, we'll just take it. We'll take it step by step. So once again, thank you, Director Warner, for being here with us this evening. Let us know what you're thinking about in your budget. And okay, floor is yours.
Okay, good evening, everyone. As you know, DPW, we call it one budget, but there's actually 6. Water, sewer, central maintenance, regular DPW, and I have 2 revolving funds that are fairly small. Just to give a little background on the department and the organization of the department, and all there's now 10 divisions now that central maintenance is under DPW, which consists of, when I'm fully staffed, 68 personnel. I have 3 union contracts underneath my staffing. That's the SSEA. I have 9 full-time and 1 part-time under the SSEA. New contract with Central Maintenance, our electricians. And of course, the W schedule under UPSEU, the United Public Service Employees Union. We have 3 out of the 68 are NR positions, myself, George Vanderlinder, the facilities manager, and Sam Urkel, the deputy director. So in all of my budgets, I had requested for 1 more staff member in the W, we'll call it the W schedule general budget. That position hasn't been filled in 4 years. It's the assistant engineer position. So that, and as of right now, that got cut back as Bob's position did to January, half the year for next year. So that was cut back $35,000. The big news in my budgets, the really big increases that really jump out there. Obviously, we settled 3 union contracts. I was on the negotiating team for all 3. I can give a little more information on the exact breakdown of the contracts. I won't drill down too far, but I would like to give you the W workers union breakdown a little bit. Seems to be some inaccurate information out there on raises. I just like to say that the W union received a 2 and 2 for the 3 years. I believe 0.5, 1 and 1's been floating around out there. Along with that, they got double longevity, doubled their years in longevity. Within that W schedule, there's a T pay scale that the technical positions, the wastewater treatment plant and the vehicle maintenance folks, they all had 2 added steps to their pay scale, which equals 2.5% per year. And also starting this July 1, your water distribution crew who takes care of all your water main breaks and emergencies will be moved to the T schedule also. They're in W now. So some of the T schedule equates in the next 2 years, it equates to much more than the 2%, 2 and 2, but they're on the technical end of things that takes many years to get those licenses. So I'd like to say that I completely support my whole department. I sat in all negotiations. I will also echo what Chief Strahan said and Chief Haig. I run a very large department. We touch every department in the city, every taxpayer, almost every day. And I'd like to say that I support my staff 100%. And I can't do my job without them. So that's kind of what I'm opening with. The general side budget, the DPW budget, has a fairly large increase in solid waste. Solid waste has all of a sudden, along with fuel and everything, gone crazy since February. I'm working on another contract right now. Some of you may recall we had a 3 and 2, a 3-year contract with the CEP for our trash disposal. They recently went bankrupt with hardly any notice, and another company bought them out. When the company buys them out under those circumstances, they can cancel all existing contracts, and that's what happened. I had 2 weeks to figure out where we're going to take our trash. So that thrown in with the budget season's been fun. Right now, we do have a bridge contract until June 30th, but it's $8.75 more per ton than what we were going to be paying in July. So I'm working on a new 3-year deal. Solid waste has gone up excessively in the last 3 or 4 months. The big reason for it is a couple of the incinerator plants are being decommissioned. There's no new plants going online out there. So where we take our trash is turned into a transfer station and taken off to another state to a landfill. So thus you have fuel charges, you have increased tip fees per ton. The good news on this year is we're going to be fine, because on the recycling side of things in that same voted budget, I think some of us recall we signed a 5-year deal where we're going to pay for recycling. I'm happy to report the average market value has not dipped to us paying that $100 a ton, and we're still receiving very small checks per month, but we're not paying. So you'll see a major decrease in the recycling disposal right underneath the trash disposal in the FY23 budget. Whether that's enough bottom line in the budget to get us through FY23, I'm kind of hopeful right now, but if the recycling market changes, then we're going to have to start spending money on recycling, but I have my fingers crossed. So far, it looks pretty good. So I think we're okay in that line, but fuel. So fuel, we're paying approximately, I looked at it, about 35% more than we did a year ago. I didn't increase my budget. In fact, I decreased a few of the budget line items. I'm going to be okay for this year with fuel due to the fact that I've always built a little extra in because you just don't know what kind of emergencies you're going to run into. You know, we've ran equipment for days and days, say when we have a lot of trees down, so on and so forth. But we've been pretty lucky this year. So like I said, it's about 33%. We're in the last, we used to procure the contract for the whole city when it came to fuel. This year, Laura Phelps will be taking it over. But right now we're paying 13 cents below pump price. I know there's a lot of questions out there on that. And the contract was with Sand Reason and expires June 30th. So Laura's looking for another contract now. We don't get a per gallon price. We always get below pump price on those bids. There's other parameters to meet. They got to supply us fuel 24/7 in emergencies for obviously public safety and DPW. So basically all my budgets, it's all salaries and wages, the increases. The other solid waste issue, and I can get to it a little later, is in sewer. We have a problem with sludge going up pretty drastically this year, but I don't want to get too far out ahead of the general budgets. That's basically my major changes in the main budget out of the 80 or so accounts. Those are the big ticket items that changed. So I'll take any questions on the regular DPW budget.
Okay, anybody have any questions?
I do.
Okay, Councilor Jasorga?
So I know it's late, but still this is 6 huge, it's budget. So I don't want to just gloss over this because it's late and we're tired. I just wanted to say I had a lot of questions about the sewer and the water enterprise fund, which for those of you who have to get up early, that might not make you happy, but I'm just saying.
Yeah.
I think it's too much for us to go by too fast. So can we take this a page at a time? Like, what budget are we going to start with? I saw with the overview and what page we're on. Are we starting with central?
Page 132, Councilor
Okay.
Forgy, the regular general budget, and then central maintenance. I think they're in a row here.
Okay. Well, central maintenance is earlier. I had read this all ahead of time, but it is a lot to do in an evening.
Whatever the chair chooses, it doesn't matter to me.
Okay, so hang on.
Director Warner, you were down 130,000, as I recall, from a couple of years ago. Was that under the general DPW budget?
Yes, 133 in the general DPW. It was a total of 150. The rest came out of central maintenance.
Okay. So you asked for just under the DPW budget on page 132. You must have asked for another staff personnel and did not get that. Is that correct?
One half I can hire in January.
Okay.
That hasn't been funded in 4 years, Councilor Disorder.
Okay.
And I think to address the $133,000 cut, that was during COVID. At the time, we could have afforded a parks personnel due to the fact that everything was completely shut down. And then I had other openings. So by the end of that budget cycle, I reinstated that position with other salaries. So all the full-time positions are reinstated that were affected by the cuts.
Okay. And then we're going on to page 133, is that right?
Sure.
The highway division?
DPW City Yard on 133 is next. Yeah,
That actually was a cut. That was a reduction in the
Yeah,
amended budget under permanent salary. So did you lose staff there too?
Under 422,
Yes, under
Yes.
4220, the first
Yes.
line.
We-
Your
we
amended
had-
budget was 259,072, and this year it's 244,000.
so the DPW with the large union, they move around when we have people leave. So we have staff on the highway department that are on the lower part of the pay scales coming this year. So the three of them are new personnel as opposed to a few personnel that have either left or moved to another division. So you'll see some of the salaries may have gone down a little bit, but it's just through attrition.
Okay.
Anybody else have questions? Can we just go back a minute? I would like, Director Warner, could you tell me, you already mentioned that you have a contract, an independent contract with the mayor, as does central maintenance and also your deputy assistant.
Yes.
Can you please tell us what those salaries are?
Yes, currently I'm at 102,997. On January 1st, I'll be 106,087. Facilities
Okay.
manager, if you're ready,
Okay, go ahead.
is at 65,353 and will be 67,731 on July 1st. Deputy director is at 81,000 even and will be 83,430 on July 1st under contract.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I appreciate that. Okay, are there any questions right now from Ways and Means on both the DPW administration engineering budget and our DPW city yard budget?
Hold on a minute.
Speak out if you need to, because, okay.
I just want to get to where city yard. I went back to central maintenance for a minute.
Okay, city yard is 133, page 133.
Look at that.
Okay. Okay. Let's just go along if we can, Marlo, that would be great for us.
Okay, is there any other questions on the general budget for DPW? Or are we gonna go to central maintenance?
All right.
Okay, well, I'm a little confused, so please bear with me, okay? So when you say on the general DPW budget, are you talking pages 132 to 130, 7, 8, 9? Okay, so you're talking about everything that's in there, including the cemetery piece.
Yeah, through
You said-
141, Counselor 4G, and then
Got
the
it.
central maintenance has a separate general budget, excuse me.
Right, okay. I get that. I'll just open it up to Ways and Means counselors. Does anybody have any questions about the general DPW budget?
All right.
Is there no funding for this cemetery wages? Is that just something that gets put under the purview of another employee?
So the cemetery budget was showing zeros. A few positions that have not been refilled or re-energized since the cuts was my temp help, some summer help.
Okay.
I'm budgeted for 4, 1 in water, 1 in sewer, 1 in parks, and 1 in the traffic division. So at one point, there was temp wages for a summer help worker in the cemetery, which is now absorbed by the Parks Department. You'll see that in those cuts, the cemetery grounds and materials were cut that year too, in that November, I believe it was in November. But I've reestablished those numbers in this budget, or I should say the current budget, and they're just carrying over to this year's new budget.
So would that be kind of some of the reflection of the increase for the park salaries as they've changed over the last couple of years?
No, that was mostly contractual.
Okay.
Like I said, the cemetery work and the materials was absorbed by the Parks Department when I had to cut those.
Mhm.
Some of the materials are for repair of headstones, so on and so forth. Some of the ground equipment. As you know, we can't get too close with the larger equipment in some of these older cemeteries. So,
Right.
This is, Councilor Forgy.
Sure, just
More
go,
questions.
yes, go ahead.
This is an incredible amount of work on the budgeting part of this.
Yes.
So, does Director Gilman do a lot of the budgeting part with you, or are you responsible for most of it?
well, essentially, I'm responsible for all 6 budgets. I converse with Liz a lot. Her and I work on some of the water and sewer stuff together. I also work with Kelly a little bit on the debt, provide information for her. So I'd say about 97% me and 3%, 2% Liz, and well, 2.5%.
Wait a minute.
It's incredible. It's incredible, and I feel like there's so much here that, Liz, I think I didn't mean that in any whatever. I'm just looking and I thought we can miss a lot because I don't even know how many people are under each line item of this, but I am always grateful, just so you know, for all that you do.
No, I really have more involvement with water and sewer because it's a little more involved.
Yeah.
But yes, like as I depend on the fire chief and the police chief, they know the day to day what they have to work for and what they need. And so we all work together. So that's all.
Well, the percentages I put out there are a little skewed. If you want to talk about hours that I put in, well, maybe the percentage goes, but no, Liz is very helpful in the water and sewer. Her and I converse quite a lot as I'm trying to build the operating on that.
So under the traffic division, Marlo, it's okay if I call you Marlo, is it? Is that
No
okay?
problem.
Okay. So under the traffic, I didn't realize tonight, are you responsible for all of the maintenance and repair things, or what's the agreement with the other departments like police and fire? They were talking tonight about how you helped with the repair of the vehicles.
We maintain all of the city's vehicles at the DPW. That includes school vans, police, fire, police, school, fire, our 60 some odd vehicles. The only time we contract something out is either we can't fix it, or as the chief was speaking to earlier, Chief Haig, or we're completely buried in the shop. We have been one short in the shop since May. We've been fortunate enough to try and keep up with everything. But some of the small maintenance is falling behind, or we got some equipment parked we're not using.
So how many people are there that work in that department?
Okay. Vehicle maintenance. We have 5, and then we have the vehicle maintenance supervisor, and we have 4 right now. And I put out an offer to a mechanic today through HR, so hopefully we'll get that one filled.
One of the things I think council would find really interesting is Marlo has an org chart, and I really think it shows the magnitude, yes, of the responsibilities he has and just how many people he manages. And I think it's really important for people to see that. So maybe we'll send that out to you.
That would be good, because it's so much. There's so much
Yes.
information there that I think most of us don't actually have.
Right.
And
I got two org charts. I got with names and without. The one without reflects the open positions right now, which I think would be very helpful, but it lists what their duties are. Right now, we're 7 short, to be frank. And we're 6 laborers short, and that's where we need labor this time of year more than any time of year. So we're getting by, but that's it.
And do we have applicants for those positions?
Yes, we're starting to get applicants funnelling in a little more. But honestly, I don't know if I brought this up at a previous council meeting, maybe it was a staff meeting, but we've probably had, 24, 25 interviews since June. I shouldn't say June, but going back to the fall, right around fall time. And we've had no less than 8 to 10 applicants set them up for an interview and they don't show up, not even with a phone call. We've had 4 coming through the door. We did their physical, their pre-med physicals, drug testing, everything to get them aboard. And then when we ask them for a date they're starting, they say, no, thank you, I'm staying where I'm at. So we ran into the cycle. And I know you heard me talk about the CDL license. That's another court thrown in. So I guess I'd be lying if I didn't say to you that it's been very difficult for about 9 months to manage the DPW and the supervisors to manage the, the priorities. We used to get to 5, 10 priority ones in a day, but it just can't happen right now. So we're doing the best we can, taking the highest priorities, the health and safety of the public. I'm hoping to fill more coming up. I made another offer to a wastewater treatment plant opening today also. So hopefully they start funneling in.
Marlo, can I ask you about our snow and ice removal budget? How did we do this year?
I looked at it the other day because they said we might get snow flurries.
Oh, man.
No.
I'm pretty sure I can send that number to you if it's far off, but I'm sure we landed with about 53,000 overall left bottom line.
Wow. Okay.
Out of the 217,800.
Okay. Okay.
Wow.
That's pretty good. Here's if I may for just a moment, just pause, and I apologize to you, Director. I would like to make a suggestion. I don't know how the other members of Ways and Means feel about this, but I would like to address this particular operating budget that we're doing now, and then do central maintenance budget if we could, and then we will adjourn and we will put Director Marlowe on the agenda on Wednesday starting with water, sewer, and then transfer station. Is that something that anybody or everybody is interested in doing? Okay, I see 1, I see 2. Ginny?
Yes.
Okay, all right. So again, with my apologies, Director, but we are running a little late this evening. So let's continue.
We did 6 hours the other night.
Yeah, well, I'm not a willing participant for that. I'm very sorry. But okay, so let's finish up on the DPW, the general administrative, engineering, all the other pieces of this particular budget, and then we'll go to central maintenance, and then we will adjourn, if that's acceptable with everybody. Okay.
Councilor Forgy, it's acceptable. And may I just ask that if we missed anything tonight, because we're
Yes.
doing a lot, I'd like to reserve the whatever to be able to go back starting from here on, you know.
I think
Other
that's a
ones we
very
do,
wise
okay?
idea. There's a lot to digest here, so, and you know, we always do our best thinking when we're off camera, so.
Yes.
Well, I certainly was prepared to go a line for line, but 500 lines later, I think would be a really long night. So I kind of just tried to point out the main increases or decreases in the overall budget. So
Okay,
whatever you have for me Wednesday is fine. The transfer station budget's very small. It's a fairly small revolving fund. You know, I got transfer station in my main general operating that you see here we're working on now. And then I have a revolving fund that carries 2 employees for the transfer station.
okay, okay.
If I could,
Yes, please go ahead, Councilor Toronto.
just as a follow-up to the snow and ice, seeing as how there's money left over, is there
No.
your earmarks for where you're planning on using that?
That all folds back to the general at the end of the year, closes out. Correct me if I'm wrong, Liz.
Oh, I was just going to talk about snow and ice is one you don't want to transfer out of because it's
Right.
Right.
considered a legal deficit. So
Right.
and it has parameters of if you lower it, you can't put it back the following year. So you don't want to be transferring out of snow and ice, basically.
Right.
It's
Yep.
also, Mike, it's also the only line item in the operating budget that can be overextended.
Right. Right.
But then you have to raise what's left on your tax sheet.
Right. No, it wasn't for the projected budget going forward. It was just so it just goes back to the general fund because if there's a surplus.
Yes, that's what I believe.
It
I
gets
didn't know if
certified
it-
as free cash. So that's where part of your free cash number comes from.
Okay.
Right. Just as I'll have leftover salaries this year, I think it does the same thing, correct, Liz?
Yes.
You'll see that I moved a couple of lines around in the snow and ice, but I didn't change the bottom line number. Just went
Right.
off history. I pushed a little more to salt for next year.
Okay. Do we have any more questions on the general operating budget? If not, we'll move on to central maintenance.
100.
It's on page 99. Okay,
So under the central maintenance budget, actually, you'll see a line, if you go down to the 4th line, the custodians, they actually, they're in the W union also. Just of the yard. The 2 electricians and labor mechanic, which is our plumber, they're the newly formed union for central maintenance. There's 3
Okay.
personnel. And of course, George's wages at the top.
okay,
Facilities manager. Longevity pay bumped up a little bit. We had another person added this year that hit their 10 years. This was the one contract that I don't believe is double longevity at this point in time. It wasn't part of the agreement. There's a few services that I bumped up a little bit. And some of the services I bumped up a little bit were as simple as window cleaning at the police department or Sanderson Street. Those were cut in that November cut that Councilor Storer was referring to earlier. There's been a few other items that were added to as we needed to add to the contracts for, I think it's Siemens and the other control companies, our heating and HVAC people. We put them on a maintenance contract to do scheduled maintenance on our facilities rather than George having to do that. So we did add that in this year. When George decides to go off in the Blue Yonder in the Bahamas or whatnot, we'll be looking to have an HVAC tech come aboard to add to our central maintenance staff. So, you know, it's the right thing to do. Sometimes you're climbing 2 stories of ladders in the snow, trying to change a filter or check something out. So We decided to put the companies on a service contract to help us out with that.
Okay,
I have a question about this.
sure, go ahead.
So under this, the wages administration, is that that's one person, right?
Yes, that's
And we
the
have-
facilities manager.
We have one electrician or two?
Two, that's why that line item's so high.
Okay,
There's two on that line.
all right.
And then the labor
The-
mechanic is
The
your one.
custodial services, I asked about this another night and
Okay.
somebody, whatever it was, I was in the wrong spot. So are you in charge of the custodial services for all of the different departments excluding the school departments?
Yes, George is actually directly in charge, but all the central maintenance is under me now. We have 4 custodians, 3 full-time, 1 part-time.
And how is, okay, 4, I just have to write this down, 4 full-time and 1 part-time?
Yes, the part-time is 20 hours.
And how are they divided by building?
City Hall, the senior
Yeah.
center, police department, and Sanderson Street. The police department has the 20-hour employee per week.
The police department has 20 hours.
Yes.
How
And when
about the library?
they share duties. Well, right now we got one assigned to the library. I take that back. So the senior center is generally done with by the librarian custodian, but now that we're fully staffed, they all kind of share duties, but they are assigned town hall, library, senior center, and police department. But when somebody's out, they pick up the other person's duties, or 3 of them will go ahead and head to a building towards the end of the day to get it done.
And the fire department?
They take care of their own custodial, and to my knowledge, I don't.
Mhm.
Wow.
Review it.
Another, so I don't know
But
who
I
knows
do-
this.
I do want to add that they take care of my building at 189 and the common areas at 209 Wells for the DPW also. I forgot about my own department that they show up once a week also.
And I know you're all sick of my questions, but this was my night to ask this. So I did want the breakdown in hours, like who was a full-time one and who was a part-time one. And we can save that for the next night if anyone's tired of this. And
Oh.
whoever knows that. It was like, was this a full-time person, a half-time person at this building, 1 day a week? I found it interesting when I was working at the senior center as a volunteer, because I think that person came once a week. I'm not sure about that. I mean, don't hold me on that.
No, they're there early. They were probably out the door before you got there. I know that.
Oh, yes,
'cause I was in
I'm not even
EOC.
awake then.
Yeah, I was in EOC the first couple of months solid and there early every
Okay.
morning, and our custodian was there.
I missed that whole half of the day every day, so probably just
And
exactly.
by the
what
way, questions were fine. This took hundreds of hours to put together, so I
Sure.
could answer questions all night long.
Okay, so that person at the JZ Center is a couple of hours every day?
Yeah, for the general, but sometimes when they have to do all the floors or something, they'll team up, 2 of them. Say it's time to wax floors, then it takes more than one person and get in and out of there in a timely fashion before Hope opens up, say, or the town hall opens up, or to the public.
Okay. Is there any department that needs more of that time? That's not getting the job done? I mean, I don't mean like, I'm sure that they're getting the job done. I'm sure they're doing a very good job. That probably doesn't sound right.
Well, it was, I think Chief of Staff can back me on this one. During, we went through different COVID situations throughout COVID, and we were extremely short-staffed at times. As a matter of fact, I had a list of the DPW personnel that would volunteer to help out. I think possibly down the road, we're looking at potentially maybe turning the part-time to full-time with the new buildings coming online. We know the library is pretty good size. But I was thinking about that for next year, honestly. But right now we're okay. But if we lose one like we did, it gets tough. It gets tough on them. They have to team up and kind of, really get going on things early in the morning and get through things. So.
Yeah, so like our custodian in City Hall, who's there most of the time is Chris. He's awesome, but he works whatever he works at the crack of dawn till not very late into the afternoon. To me, because I'm with you, Ginny. I don't even want to be there before 9:30. But so I know there's stuff just because he does stuff on a rotation. So the observation is that the everyday stuff gets done every day. And then the bigger stuff gets done on a schedule. Sometimes somebody else comes in and helps him. They get it done. But I would say that all over the city, we certainly could make use of more custodial if we had.
The general common areas are done between anywhere from 6:30 to 8 or 9 in the morning to these buildings. Also, Chris will come down to 189 and 209 on Thursdays. But our building's much smaller, much less to maintain. The common areas can be a little tough, next door, the bathrooms and whatnot, but they are on a rotation, especially if somebody goes on vacation. So they divvy it up. George does a really nice job of making it all work and what's priority and what we have to get to when we're shorthanded. So he does a good job with that.
And does each department head order their cleaning supplies?
No, that's right in the central maintenance budget.
No, I can see it. I can see it. And I said, I can see which departments look like they must clean, they must clean more. There's different ones that are just higher fees. That was all. I thought, does somebody order it from that department?
It depends on the chemicals too. There might be something that needs to be used a little differently at the police department as opposed to the town hall or whatever. Not to get into all the ugliness that the chief talked about, but what happens. But.
Okay.
We don't have as many bodily fluids in City Hall, luckily. I shouldn't say that out loud. Sorry.
That's right. That's right. If we're good, I think we're in a good place to pause at this particular time. So why don't we go ahead and do that? And thank you again, Director Warner, for your patience with us. It's a long process, but we will see you at our next meeting, which is Wednesday, April 27th, 2022, 6 p.m. via WebEx. I don't think there's any other business for this evening. And you will go first. You will be on the agenda first. And then we will also look at economic development and marketing and GSET. And that should take us to the end of the operating budget review. Having said all of this, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
You're very welcome.
Thank you, everybody.
All in favor, please. Aye. Okay. The meeting ends at 8:48. Good night. Thank you all very much. I appreciate it.